Welcome, I'm Ike. This is Draw Process. I'm going to draw a comic book page, process about the work I'm doing on the page, and my development and mindset in becoming the practice of my art.
And the thumbnails are on 2 pages because as I thumbnailed it out, there's actually a few panels under these, and that was going to be the page, and I decided to add a few at the beginning. So I was able to just draw those extra panels to the side. So yeah, we got a 6-panel grid. I usually don't like to do, it's just personal taste, the rigid sort of 6 or 9 panel where the gutters on each row align. I don't like them to align. It creates a symmetry, a grouping. I don't know. I just prefer the feel of none of the gutters quite lining up and things not being precisely in ratio to each other. So I don't have each panel be the same size as the other or a specific ratio to the other. Sometimes I have a situation where I have smaller panels and I want the two or 2 panels that I want exactly splitting the page in half, or that little section in half, like one person's face and the other person's face. Then I might want some symmetry and measure that in that particular situation. Yeah, so Sword, just a close up on his emotion, his reaction to, this isn't exactly in the script. The script tells me what they're going to say, what they're going to do. When I thumbnail, I'm directing it out, typically. So rather than in the script. So the script just says what they say and how he's going to walk towards the boat and all that. And I even changed some of that as we go. But I decided we've just seen the boy be carried off by King Croc, and Sword and Farah looking on, helpless, but they're very small in the panel. So as the reader, I like to give them emotion or an emotional reaction from the characters. So like seeing the boy carried off by a crocodile might elicit a certain emotion in the audience, and the reader, but to see how Sword is reacting, to help them put themselves in his shoes and not just have this be their experience, right? So his reaction, some tense frustration. I wanted him to have a heavy body language, head down, a little sweaty from the fight, and Farah being a little stoic and not emotionally available or whatever. So kind of a little empathetic, a little feeling sorry for him, wanting to comfort him to a degree, but a little bit business as usual kind of. And you see that in her very upright stature and stuff, whereas he is weighed down by what just happened. This little bit of acting that you put into your characters is very helpful. So it's not just facial expressions. It's how they feel, how they're posed. Yeah, that's something I really like to do. Camera angles and how you set up your panels, that helps imply mood and everything too. There's other ways to do it than just the pose or just the expression on their face. It can be the color. It can be the camera being very low, or whatever. So. Just a few thoughts on how I did this. Simple backgrounds here. I just need to get my characters talking back and forth a bit, him walking across to the canoes he's going to commandeer them basically, but pay them very well for it, because he's got his own rules he follows. So he's got to, like, it's kind of a complicated thing to walk to a canoe. We see the guys there. I put them in motion, right? They're in the middle of getting reset in their canoe because it just got knocked into the air by King Croc. So, and then they just appear out of nowhere in this panel, right? So if they were just sitting there still in the canoe, that might seem a little odd, because how did they even get there, right? But even without giving an establishing shot of them, because it's not always necessary, in my opinion, I'm just going to show them in motion. And one guy's reaching over like he's pulling an oar out of the water. So there's a reason they haven't left yet. They are present in the middle of something when Sword approaches them. I go from that to Sword in the canoe, holding out an oar to Farah, and the oarsmen, the boatsmen are on they're getting out of the canoe, or have just gotten out, I think. So there's always that sense of stretching time, or how far can you go between one edit and another. He is somewhat in a hurry, so if someone's moving very slowly and carefully, you might give more panels to show the action unfold. But he's kind of in a hurry, so that's one of the factors that I'm considering. But also, if it's clear what a character is doing, and so for him to go from approaching the canoe to standing in the canoe is not a stretch of the imagination. From he's holding out an oar for Farah to take it, and she's reaching for it as she's entering the boat. And I've said this before about trying to capture multiple actions in your panels. It is not simply because it brings the characters more to life. It makes things more alive or interesting. It gives points of contact, for points of connection for the reader to connect the panels together, the sequential story together. So when she's reaching for the oar instead of simply entering the boat, when in the next panel she's holding an oar, the reader understands that, like they had a point of contact between the two panels. So yeah, that's important stuff, and how I think about it. That's how I think of it. So there you go. Let's see. I've been doing the sketchbook still. I've shared a little bit of it on Instagram, but not very much. Still not sure how to do it, how I want to do it, but I think I've been moving from, starting this year, realizing I needed to commit to a plan for the whole year, and really be public about my journey. There's a humility in that to really just be public with it, and an accountability. So I went from that to okay, I need to get even broader. I need to do even more with my practice, commit to practice things more, like discipline, the sketchbook, let's say. And now, that I've started to do some of that, I've started to have a dialogue, you could call it that, with myself, but with what does it mean to have the discipline and have the practice, and what should I be doing with that practice? So same way that starting these videos had me thinking about, and once you start doing it, you kind of have this dialogue about, okay, what do I want them to be about? What do I want to share with these? How will I share it? Like, and then that it opens up new opportunities for yourself, because yourself as an artist is being questioned and explored in a different way. Same thing with this, with my practice when it comes to drawing outside of the comics, so sketchbooks and commissions and stuff too. That hasn't been an area that I could explore as much until I approached it, until I started playing with it. But at this point, I think it's getting more clear to me what I need to do with it. I can't say for sure what the art should be, but I have just a sense of what the journey is, the direction. So some of the things I've done before would be studying anatomy, practicing my figures, warming up, loosening up before I do a page, practicing, facial expressions and whatnot. I've also studied other people's styles in a sketchbook. And I do this probably, some artists, my friends, they probably would think that I do this less than many people, but I still have done this, is be so, to be an artist is maybe inherently to be creative, flexible, not only able to draw, but able to draw in different ways, to make art, but make art in different ways. And then we kind of get into this situation where we are a bit of a jack of all trades, not refining and clarifying what we do, because we're just kind of playing with all of it. And there is a place for that. I'm not opposed to people doing that. And I could see it being helpful, especially early on. It's probably pretty natural to do that. So I've been thinking about how to, same thing with style. I can draw in a more realistic style or more cartoony or whatever. But instead of playing in all the areas, or working to improve in certain areas, or try to be more like other artists or skill levels or something, it is being killing off a lot of those directions you could go that maybe you used to go, to hone in on just what it is you do. And this gets, I feel like you can't go here without going into being a person, who you are as a person, and who you are as a person in relationships with others and stuff. Because these questions get very, very personal. And I'm very glad that, in my opinion, art is a very human and personal thing to do. So these very personal questions that can be very challenging about what is it you want to do and should be doing, and that you can do, that you can commit yourself to. And I don't mean it just hard work ethic, nose to the grindstone. I don't mean that. I mean, if you recognize that it's like your fate, it's the thing that really gets inspired in you, that really is passionate and is all that, it's not just discipline, right? But when you're figuring out who you are and you're showing up in life and showing up in your art, and there's a point at which you sacrifice alternative selves to invest in the self you're choosing to be, whether that's in your personal life or with your art. So I'm thinking about I'm thinking about how that will be for me, to choose my direction, right? And to sacrifice the others. So what should I be drawing? What should I be practicing in sketchbooks, or, other than just the page work I do on the comic? If I want to be a visual storyteller, with lots of figures and complex arrangements, complex poses and emotion, I want to do it quickly. I want there to be, a real world kind of three-dimensionality to what I'm portraying. I want to be able to draw it quickly with simple line work. I want to abstract and make it simpler. But like, if I'm not doing, like, can I do that in my sketchbook? Can I only do that? Like, hone in on something, and maybe there's something I do for a period of time, and of course you'll grow and change, and you'll let go of certain things and take on others. But if you're trying to grow in 1,000 directions, you might not get as far down the road and is going in one direction. Now that doesn't mean you're locked in and you can't change, because if you're going 1,000 directions, you can't as easily sense where things are wrong, where things don't reflect your values, aren't who you want to be, because you're not progressing very much, and it's such a small piece of what's happening. It's kind of hard to make out where the problems are, where the pain points and pleasure points are. So if you focus on one and you're wrong, at least you can be aware of when it's not right, when it doesn't feel right, and when it's not fruitful. Then you know it and you can change, but you have to be open to change. Have an openness there to not just get stuck in it. But and the good with the bad too. I mean, there are artists that have a lot of self-loathing, you could say, and they put that into their work. There's a way in which their work doesn't necessarily look like self-loathing, but it, I don't know, it's harsh, it's incredibly overworked almost, like, I don't know how to, anyways, you can, the person's qualities that might be considered dark or negative are contributing to a more beautiful piece of art. So it's not simply embracing your best points or striving to attain only your best. This acceptance of the bad too, because that's going to be baked into the art and make it even better. So if you're struggling with self-doubt in your work, like, that is useful in the work itself. It's not something to kill off, because that's not what I mean by killing off paths. I mean what you actually do. Like, what sort of art you engage in, where you engage. So I started drawing, like, environments, like I'm using reference, and I'm looking at an image of all sorts of different interior and exterior spaces, and I am simplifying them down into the basic lines, And then some of them I'm inking and trying to get in a high contrast, simple way. And as I do that, I see that I'm getting better at constructing the drawings and the three-dimensional spaces, and I'm developing a greater repertoire of looks to architecture and everything, and of how to draw things at different angles and whatnot. And people in those spaces is good too. Seeing people in the, in chairs, whatnot. But I'm also seeing how when I kind of get in the flow of that after 30 minutes or more or something, just however long it takes, I start to see what it looks like when I'm in the flow. So when I'm in the flow, the lines are not perfect. They wobble some. Like if I'm drawing a staircase, they're not all perfectly aligned or measured accurately, but they do convey, what they are. And, it's still good art, but it starts to take on these different qualities, right? So when I see what that looks like, then it's showing me this is a direction I want to develop. Is like when I want to be in the flow when I work. I want to be able to work for longer periods of time in a state of flow. So when I'm in a flow, what choices do I seem to make? What are my tendencies? And if I see what those are, then I should invest in those, develop those, and then I can really get somewhere that I want to be. So I'm doing it with the environments, and I'm still thinking about with figures how I want to do this, because there's no harm in knowing anatomy better and studying that. But I'm not sure how helpful it'll be. Yeah, because the kind of figures that I draw are much more a gesture, much more simplified and so on. So knowledge is not always best, right? So I think a lot of artists, you might say art teachers, they probably have a tendency towards knowledge because they're interested in education. That's kind of their focus. And probably our whole culture is much more cognitive and intellectual in our thinking about being human and making art and stuff. So it's probably like broader culture too. But yeah, I was just pausing there to wonder if I should explain that more. Yeah, let's not. Let's just leave that like I said it. So you, what was I saying? You, knowledge. Yeah. So, it has to do with what I was saying about like kind of killing off certain paths to choose your path, right? So like, if you seek more knowledge, then what you actually are doing is getting better at being a knowledge seeker, at being a, I don't know, some kind of like an archetype of like, you got the goggles and you're kind of like the scientist hunched over at the thing, right? I don't know, but that's what you're getting better at what you're doing. You're not simply gaining knowledge, you are becoming a knowledge seeker, and practicing it being that, and it's seeing things in that way. And so how can you do that without it rubbing off on you? How can you do that without becoming the kind of artist that in their art seems to be trying to seek knowledge? This is very abstract, and I don't like going here too much because it gets messy. Like so many people have different opinions about philosophy and everything that it's hard to even describe. I'm just trying to describe like a way of thinking. I'm not trying to describe ontology and reality here. So the pursuit of gaining more knowledge might actually change your art and change the way you approach your art. And it's not necessarily better. So, and I don't simply mean that you might learn things the wrong way and then you're stuck with that or something. I don't simply mean that. I just mean to create art is not only about gaining greater knowledge. And what kind of knowledge are you gaining, right? So, you could study ancient imagery instead of modern correct anatomy, right? So this would be a different kind of approach, like a different kind of knowledge you could be seeking. And who's to say that studying that, those forms and lines and stuff would not make your art better or more interesting than if you studied scientific anatomy? I think it would be more interesting because less people do it, right? It'd be more rare. But again, that's still, the pursuit of knowledge, perhaps too. There's other ways to do it. And that's what I'm struggling with when it comes to how do I want to approach the sketchbook. So I definitely lean towards it's a very personal, internal kind of experience and process that I would prefer that I don't want to subscribe to a certain school of art. And if you think like historically, there were actually schools of art and everyone draws that way, kind of like schools of philosophy. Everyone's going to think that way and develop more in that direction. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do. My approach is very eclectic and very anti-establishment and whatever. So I want to go a very internal path, and I think that is something. Well, it's what I have to offer. It's what I have to talk about and share. And even if you disagree with me on a lot of things, you might get something out of thinking this way. Some in what you do. So I don't have a school to subscribe to. I can't just go off of what they say. And in the same way that I've been disconnecting from social media and other people's ideas, like the news, podcasts, whatever. As I'm disconnecting from those things, I'm also I seem to be disconnecting from other people's art, other people's comics. Like, God, I do like reading comics, but part of me doesn't even want to, because I don't want to be influenced too much. I don't want to be seeking that. At least I don't want to be seeking to emulate other people's styles and stuff. So to develop my own language here, and that is. I'm going to steal from other places. I'm going to adopt from other places. I'm going to doubt myself or strive and want to compete and surpass other people in whatever area. And that's human. We're all going to have some of that going on. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be helpful. But there's also this inner journey that I'm going on. That's going to affect the art for sure. And I see that in my work. I know that when I first was drawing comics, there was equal parts trying to follow some models of how to do it, the size paper you use, the tools you use, how you do it. Certain artists I I enjoyed and wanted to be, using their style or techniques or tricks. So, there was that, equal parts of that, but also equal parts like total naivety, total unawareness of myself. Like I didn't know what I was bringing to the table. So as I draw a page, not only am I trying to, follow other people's lead, I'm also surprising myself by my, inability to do it their way exactly. Like by my surprising myself by what's in me. And I'm like, oh, that's showing me, it's reflecting back to me a way that I think, a way that I draw, and so on. There's this constant, push and pull here of reflecting on how you're unfolding, embracing that and allowing for it, but at the same time, restricting it towards a direction. And so that's what's going on there in that journey that I'm on. And I know that, I want the work I do in the sketchbook to look like what I do in my comics. I mean, not that I'm trying to force it to look a certain way, but that the kind of art I'm making, the way, like, there's no point in me penciling beyond the rough pencils that I need for a comic. If I pencil it beyond that, then that's not directly, in sync with comic work. It's not developing specifically in this direction. It's developing some other skill that I don't need. I don't need to invest in that. So inking some in the sketchbook and then only penciling to the degree that I normally would in a comic, penciling as if I'm going to ink it, which makes the sketchbook art look less good, right? So if you're worried about sharing it with other people, if you're worried about like showing it off on Instagram or whatever, which maybe you shouldn't, because if you're worried about showing it off, then you're going to do the sketchbook as its own practice towards its own goal, and you'll have your reward. That's the reward you're going to get, is getting better at that. But if you're after something else, like myself, then you shouldn't be worried about how it's going to look to other people. It should be, and that goes for the comic book too. You shouldn't worry about how many likes you get or how it looks to someone, because what I do in the sketchbook it's for a purpose. It's intentional. It's not an end in itself. And I think that's good advice. All right. Yeah, on this page, sometimes I would double back to other panels, like when I'm drawing these soldiers, there's a dead soldier on the ground. Like at first I was drawing him in a curled up kind of position because he was on his knees earlier in another panel, but it was like he was blocking the view behind him. He was taking up more of the panel space, and I was like, no, let's just have him laying flat. He can fall over between one panel to the next. That is not a break in continuity. It'll be all right. So I laid him out. But yeah, sometimes I catch little details on a previous panel that I need to like correct after I've drawn the next panel. Like forgetting exactly the structure of this raft, and then needing to go back and I got to put in a few things there. Yeah, so constructing the environments for this scene, I could have put anything there I want, and that's part of the like magic of comics. When you see someone else's comic book, I mean, like, that's an unseen part of it, is the fact that none of that background was there, none of the environment was there. They chose it. Choosing the choosing of that is a huge part of how your comic's going to look, and what your style is. And I've already mentioned in a prior video, I intentionally went with a large flat wall on one side to make it easy to draw that background again and again. Like, I wanted that to be easy. But every choice here affects the real, how real the world feels to the reader, and then that kind of thing. So, this simple background here. In that second panel, there's a crocodile, just a little squiggle going off away from them, and that's King Croc with the sun in his jaws. So, just a little hint of them getting away. Yeah, the whiteout step, like this brush I have, it works pretty darn well, so it's very easy to just go back and throw in some whiteout and correct a few things. So when I ink and I'm throwing in like shadows and like the lines on this back, there is a flow state I'm trying to get in, to be pretty loose with it and not too self-critical or too perfect, just like go with my gut. And then there are times where after it's done, I look, at this phase when I'm using whiteout, I look and I'm like, that's not good enough. Like, I'm not happy with that. Let's go ahead and throw a little whiteout in and get it a little more presentable. And that's for personal taste. It's like, but it wasn't necessarily a mistake that I inked it, the way I did in the first place, right? It's a mistake to ink it incorrectly the first time, in like a one way of looking at it, but in another, like, I was successful at staying in a flow state and not being critical or whatever, and using whiteout to get to the finished product. Like, that was successful. So it's all how you look at it. And here it is. There's some discussion. There's another made up cuss word. Basically, yeah. Yeah, the back and forth, the values of these yellows, of this yellow, the different values of it, to help convey depth, foreground, background. And that is it for this week. I'm going to keep being the practice of my art and figuring this out and sharing my processing and my journey with you guys. Be patient with me on getting to some, showing my scripting process, more of my coloring process, and things like that. I do want to share those things, and I will eventually get to that. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.